There we go, Dr. Sorah Dubitsky. This mic is all yours.
And I will turn on my microphone. Um, Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you for this time. It's somebody said that Susan was saying before, and I'm paraphrasing it. It's and Myrna was saying the same thing that the course is teaching is to stay focused on God, love, have that in our minds all the time. And, I heard from Susan that, sometimes we slip out. And I was just reading, I, I don't know, maybe that went into the wrong window. Yeah. Okay. Robert, Dino, hello. It was something political. Right. And you got rid of it. Yeah, typically we don't discuss anything political or the groups I've been involved with in the past year or so. It's focused on the course and what the course says and how to live in the course. And, um, sometimes the political world just screams for attention. And the course, the discipline of the course is to, no matter what, stay focused on God, love. Um, so I've been talking about, I'm calling it an ACIM basics or A Course in Miracles basics. And there was something I would from my book that will be published momentarily that I was just rereading, and I would just like to quote it. What it says talks about a holy relationship, and a holy relationship is one in which both people agree to see each other through the eyes of love rather than fear, to recognize the divine in one another. This is the part that I love. Recognize the divine in one another and to let that recognition be the teacher. To recognize the divine in one another and to let that recognition be the teacher. The course would say, instead of the word divine, the course might use the word to see the face of Christ, which is to see the innocence. Another quote from my book, now if I could find it, one of the people I've studied is a psychologist from like the 1930s and 1940s, Eric Fromm, and he wrote a book about love and what is love. And let's see if I can find that somewhere. And what he said is that the only problem, here it is, in the Art of Loving, psychiatrist Eric Fromm, and they got it, this is like 1930s. He argues that humans' awareness of separateness is the source of all anxiety. Love, he says, reaches into the depths of another person's being. That's like seeing the face of Christ or seeing the divinity in someone else, recognizing that we're all children of God. We all came from the same source, like in the beginning when we had the Big Bang. If people believe in the Big Bang, everything kind of splintered out from one thing. And we all carry that awareness of the one thing within us. That's what Kabbalah teaches. We were, all one and one with God, and then there was some kind of big shattering, and the oneness was splintered into little shards and became separate. And the separateness became bigger and bigger and bigger, and the source of love was forgotten. And then the way, let's see, love, he says, reaches into the depths of another person's being and forms a profound bond that brings both self-awareness and understanding of the other. Love dissolves the boundaries of separateness and forms the basis for the us. And that's what I was talking about earlier in this essay. That what a quote from my husband, that love, that intimacy or love exists in the space between us. And that's where we talk about a lot about frequency. That's where we can, we perform the healing. We think it's your body, my body. No, where the healing occurs, where the love occurs, is in the space between us. Let's see, relationships inevitably face challenges. I won't read more, but that idea that we operate from the love in us, that love cures separateness, that the only problem we have is this idea that we're separate. And if we're separate, that means, and just housed within these fragile little bodies, that injects fear. And not to, belabor the point about politics, but one of the I don't know, problems, what politics does, it just reflects separateness. It divides people. It sees differences. My body it's protecting of self. My body or needs protection. Not only does my body need protection, but my mind needs protection. My who I am or who I think I am needs protection. Have you ever felt slighted by someone? Like your body wasn't injured, but somebody called your name, and somehow, your psyche was injured. And what A Course in Miracles does, it gives a roadmap of how to incorporate love into your awareness and how to minimize that slipping in and out that I mentioned before. And how it minimizes this slipping out is through the daily workbook lessons. I know Susan mentioned today's lesson, like good students, we started over. There's 365 lessons, and every year on New Year's Day, I start the workbook over, and I've been doing this for, I don't know, 45 years. Not totally consistently. There's probably a few years I didn't do it, but for the most part, so let's say 40 years. And one would think I would have gotten it by now. That I don't have to do it, but I'm still here in three-dimensional reality, and it's a discipline. I used that word before. It's a discipline to train the mind to, in a way, not believe its eyes, but to look for the substance underneath. I mean, it's not like gaslighting. Don't believe what your eyes tell you. But there's a process to look at what our eyes tell us, and personally, in my practice, it's look at the thought system of the world. Look at the thought system based on separateness. What happens when we think we're separate from one another? Think about it. What happens when we think we're separate from another? Well, if I'm separate from you, then I have to defend myself against you. And inevitably that happens. And inevitably in three-dimensional reality, stuff happens. It also sounds like, let's see, Dan, it also sounds like we will be returning to the days of the daily manna and multiplication of the oil and lamps for gasoline. Of I don't know, was there more to that? Um, that's what the daily lessons are. You're connecting to the highest and best within you. You know what? That's how I see God. God is the highest and best within you. It's the totality of who we are. I think, hi Myrna. I think Myrna said that in the session before this, that what is God? And I see God is like or with Susan, God is like the ocean, and we're like the little waves in the ocean. There's a section called the Little Garden that talks about that. We're like the little waves, and the waves think they're separate. Um, Another analogy is sunbeams to the sun. There's all these little sunbeams that think they're separate, but the totality is the sun. And you can't have sunbeams without the sun. You can't have the sun without sunbeams. And so when we are in that state of love, and I have to add, we can't do love by ourselves. And I have to add that. When we're in that state of love, what Eric Fromm was talking about, and I have other Joseph Campbell, I quote him, Carolyn Mace. When we're in that state of love, it's like we are hooked into the totality. And we see what the Course calls the real world. So, and what is the real world? It's this 3D world, but we see it through the eyes of love. And one thing we're asked to do, in seeing things through the eyes of love, is to see, I'll use the word, bad things, as calls for love. Okay, not to be condemned, not as bad, but and that's, I was talking about politics, because Dino put up something political. And I have in the past been a political activist. I'm not doing that now for a bunch of reasons, but I have been a political activist. Um, to be able to see whatever's going on as a call for love. So what do I mean as a call for love? Look, based on separateness, which is what this world is based on, separateness generates fear. I was saying that before. Separateness makes you defensive. Separateness means I have to protect myself. And if I protect myself, I have to be afraid of you. And if I have to be afraid of you, then then I can attack you first. And that's what's happening. You can see that. So to see it through the eyes of love is to recognize that love is the only reality there is, and to see past the separateness. And what I also find so interesting about what's happening in many politically right now. There are more and more reports about people helping each other. Neighbors helping neighbors. And so that separateness is dissolving through love. I hope that makes sense. So where does love start? And I don't know if I have it up. I won't. I typically, you use a diagram that talks about two worlds. The world of 3D reality is the one I was talking about. It's the one based on fear. It's the one based on separateness. And again, if we're separate, we're anxious. If we're separate, I'm vulnerable. I need to be afraid I'm going to die. That's what separateness says. So, and in our practice as course students to overcome that, we do these daily lessons. Does anybody want to add anything? Dino, I think Dino, James, Myrna, you want to add anything? We have a group. We have Lynn, Annie, would you like to say anything? Um,
I,
I could go on and speak forever about the course,
I
but,
love the
but go ahead.
sunbeam. Yeah, I love the analogy you gave with sunbeams, that it's part of the sun. Okay. And those little beams really can't separate, they're still there. So that was a really good analogy. I thought that was.
Well, it's in the book. The section is
Oh,
called
yeah.
Original
Oh,
Thought. So,
yeah.
so not original, some thoughts are, but yeah, that's what it says, and it is brilliant. And sometimes, when I have taught, when I've taught course classes in the past, I've started with that section because it's such a great, simple way of talking about how we're related, how we're related to each other and how we're related to God. Because in my experience, we talk, people don't want to talk about God. The word God can be contentious, but if you're talking about sunbeams and sun, and you're talking about what's another, well, and or waves in the ocean,
Right.
that which is another one that we're, collectively we're the ocean, and then we have all these little waves. But the waves have another thing, the waves have all the attributes of the ocean. They're the potential of this oceanic soup, we're living in. People talk about, I don't know if you've ever watched the show, Are You Being Served? They play it here on Saturday night in PBS. And one of the characters was talking about, how we all choose we're watching a TV show and how we all are part of this big soup thing, and we're all little orgasms in this big soup thing. Hello, Stevens. Um, and that's another way of looking at it. And I also teach sex ed, so I go into this idea of an orgasm is like a surrender to the big wave of God. But I won't talk about that now. But if you're interested, I have a video. I've been doing birds, bees, and beyond. And it's like a sex ed class, and I do it with a 19-year-old former student, and we get some really good topics going. But for this, so let me kind of retread that I was talking about. Yeah, I mentioned this going back and forth. It's keeping this course thought system in mind that all there is going on are calls for love, that people believe that separation is real. And there's a section called Above the Battleground, and we can rise above it and see it differently. And that's what these early lessons are about, seeing the world differently, seeing the world through the eyes of love. And how do we do that? So the practice of, and this was really important. This was what I wanted to talk about mostly. This was yesterday's lesson. My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability, and it addresses what I believe Susan talked about, that going back and forth, and the power of mind. So what the course says is it's our thoughts that create our reality. And I have a psychology background. I've been studying psychology for a long time. And cognitive psychology would say the same thing, that we see the world through our own ideas and beliefs about the world. And if we want to change the world, we have to change our ideas and beliefs about the world. That we actually have cognitive, structures. That's one of the terms that's used. Or we have scripts, or ideas, beliefs, kind of all sort of the same thing. And where we start changing the world and changing our lives is by looking at our thoughts. And the course practice, it's a discipline. It's called a mind training. And especially their early workbook lessons are about the mind training. And again, if somebody has anything you want to say, raise your hand or, jump in. So I'm looking at this lesson. My attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. And there's a line: nothing except your thoughts can attack you. Nothing except your thoughts can make you think you are vulnerable. And nothing except your thoughts can prove to you this is not so. So, I mean, it sounds great. I find what happens is, for me, I fall into the belief that the stream of thinking that goes through my mind all day long. Mind thinks, that's its job. It's the thoughts come in, thoughts go out, mind thinks. But what it thinks, this stuff that I quote unquote think about, what it says aren't my real thoughts. It's part of the, some psychologists talked about that, the hypnosis of daily life. It's Milton Erickson, maybe. The hypnosis of everyday life, that this stuff that comes through. Oh, I like that. This stuff that goes in, like just in. It's like a veil, and that obscures what the real thoughts are. And the real thought, what are the real thoughts? I call intuitions. That when the mind is quiet, and that's the purpose of these workbook lessons, when the mind is quiet, it allows for a whole other way of looking at the world to come in. Otherwise that stream of, I don't even want to use the word consciousness, that stream of nonsense that goes in, worry. I'm a big worrier. I am, I admit it. So the stream of, I've always been a worrier. You get the place where I have the worst wrinkles are right between, my frown lines. Um, so, it's like a self-hypnosis. So worry thoughts seem real to me. Those are my thoughts. And, how am I going to pay the bills? And then what am I going to eat? No, eating, I think I don't worry about so much anymore, but it comes in, and what's going to happen tomorrow, and what's going to happen politically, and all of these thoughts, just kind of, I think, are reality. And these structures, what I think are thoughts, have been built up over time, from time, how do you survive in this world? And I've quoted this before. Ken Momnick, one of the main teachers of the course, if not the main teacher of the course, used to talk about it takes about 30 years to build a healthy ego to survive in this world. And after that, it takes the rest of your life to undo that ego. And it gets undone, one way or another. The rest of our lives, we question, is who I was at 30, and maybe I'm not that anymore, or maybe what I believe then I don't believe now. So what then becomes what in slowing the mind, in questioning, do I like, so with my process, you're like, I'm worried again now. And then even asking the question, do I really have to worry about this? And I was actually going through this yesterday, and thinking about, or having this, I don't want to even call it thinking anymore, and having these thoughts come in about, oh my, like, oh my God, what, it's so funny to watch that and to think the thoughts are real, the oh my God thoughts, and then to say, wait a minute, the slightest disturbance to my peace of mind, it is unnecessary. And someone mentioned Buddhism before. I think it was either Susan. Oh, Stephen, you have a hand up. Okay, let me just finish this thought. So somebody mentioned Buddhism before, and I read about Buddhism. There was a conference with the Dalai Lama and an American psychologist, Daniel Goleman, did a book about it. And what I learned from that book was that to Buddhists, any thought, like the mind is like a lake, and you throw a pebble into the lake and waves, so you could see the circles. The mind is disturbed even with the tiny pebble. So that's what A Course in Miracles is like, that any thought, um, any thought can be a disturbance to the peace of mind, even what we call positive thoughts. Go ahead, Stevens. Am I pronouncing that right? Stevens with an S?
Steve,
Steve, okay. What do you got?
yeah. Yesterday I was worried about uh, a doctor's appointment. So I was waiting to see the doctor. And I noticed in myself worrying. And it had its physiological symptoms, felt a little bit tight and all that stuff. And I noticed that what made it worse was trying to stop worrying.
Mm,
And it comes to mind like someone who's drowning and they're flailing away, rather than if they could just stop and let the buoyancy of the water hold them. And so my relationship with worry and fear has most of my life been one of get rid of it, meditate. And a wise friend of mine many years ago made one statement that always stuck. He said, the first step in spirituality is not meditating, but to ask myself, why do I even want to change what's going on now? Why do I want to? And to look at that. Thank you. I'm complete.
okay. Okay, then you can take your hand down. So as you were speaking, what came to me was this a process that I need to follow more frequently, as I'm honest, and I call it the 3 R's. And the 3 R's are recognition, responsibility, release. And one of the workbook lessons just did something like that. Lesson 23. It has a similar idea: recognition, responsibility, release. So worry. it's like a habit. It feels good. And it's the illusion of control. You know, if I worry about something, I can control the outcome of what's going to happen, which we can't. That's an illusion, but you know, that's what worry is. The illusion of control. You want to answer that now? You got your hand up or no?
Yeah. One of the things about getting rid of the worry is it makes it worse.
Okay. All right. So the first step in this 3 R's, recognition, is even recognizing that this is just a thought. This is
Well, I
let's
didn't
say
finish what
it's
I didn't.
all right. Let me finish.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is just a thought. And it's my thought, and it's nothing to do with anything that's happening, but it's just my thought. So I have to recognize that all my worries is just a thought. And then the second part is take responsibility. Like, I'm creating this. No one is creating this. I am making up these thoughts. So I have to take responsibility because for thinking the way I'm thinking, and you know, not the right word. And then release is giving it over to the Holy Spirit. But in, you know, that first step, if I don't recognize that this stream of nonsense that's going through my head is of the ego and is fearful, and then the responsibility part, I'm making it up. You know what they talk about, who's Jerry Jampolsky's talk about, you know, futurizing and pasteurizing. You know, when you futurize, I'm worried about the future and what's going to happen. And when you're pasteurizing, you're focused on the past, and you know, bringing all that, and the past is over, you know, but bringing up all of the stuff that happened in the past, or that we thought happened in the past. And the only way we can heal that is right now, and that's what recognition is a part of. And then responsibility, I've gotten out of the now. And so to say the same thing that, you know, you're saying, you know, saying the same thing and saying it differently, is that to turn it over, you know, to like, okay, I release this. I'm making this up. I recognize it. I'm worried about the future. The future's based on the past. Like, I have to just in the present moment. You mentioned meditating. Like, I do deep breathing work. And you know, in the deep breathing work, you're just letting thoughts go, and you breathe in and let more thoughts come in. Breathe in light and let go of more darkness. And pray, you know, and ask. That's part of responsibility. You know, letting the Holy Spirit, the voice for God, letting that show me something else. So, okay, what do you got?
Well, I'm just airing out a new realization in that the actual process of letting go has underneath it, for me, an agenda of getting rid of it. And the actual relationship I have with worry is, now I'm just beginning to air it out, is that health is not having symptoms or disturbances or worries or fears, but it's how quick do I go back to my resting state? So there's a certain acceptance of it, rather than an agenda of giving it to the Holy Spirit, removing it, or even speeding it up. Accepting that maybe this is the way it is, relaxing with it without an agenda let the worry, it's like I hate lifting weights, but that resistance is like worry. Oh, I don't like this, but it actually helps build muscles. But what's the problem is if I don't put the weight down. So having worried occurrences and then returning back to the resting state, that relationship that I have with my worry is different than the way I've always handled it. And I just wanted to express myself with this new relationship with worry. Thank you. I'm complete.
I'm glad you're complete. And your process is whatever works. So if to you, and as you were speaking, I'm thinking, okay, that's acceptance is a big part of connecting to the Holy Spirit, letting go. That other workbook, lesson 23, it talks specifically about the idea for today introduces the thought that you are not trapped in the world you see because its cause can be changed. Because its cause can be changed, and the thought, the causes always have thinking. So this change requires first the cause be identified and then let go so that it can be replaced. So I think as soon as you say acceptance, that's part of the letting go process. And another thing I was hearing was being gentle on yourself. And that's something I don't do enough. I don't do enough. I'm very hard. I am hard on myself, but the being gentle on yourself is what Susan was talking about. Um, oh, I'm sorry, I got distracted by. Is it Robert or Gino James? What do you call yourself? Let me know in the chat. Okay, Robert or Bob. Great. Okay, so now did I lose my train of thought? I was talking about acceptance. I was talking about well, we'll go back to, what you said, acceptance. I'm sure it'll come up again. That happens when you're old. Like, oh my God, I can't be distracted anymore because I'll lose my train of thought. I was talking about that identifying the cause, letting it go so it can be replaced. So the strength of acceptance. Oh, and being gentle on yourself. I was talking about that. And I know I was saying that I'm not gentle on myself. I'm like, oh my, you're doing it again. I do. Yeah, I'm not gentle. But the process that you were outlining is very gentle. You just kind of, acceptance is really important. That goes back, that's where I was going. That goes back to this idea that when I came into Susan and Myrna's meeting, that they're talking about sin. Sin in traditional religion is something that can never be undone. And I actually always question that. You're born in original sin, you're baptized. Doesn't baptism get rid of original sin? And I'm not Christian, so I really can't answer the question, but you're still, one of my friends goes to a Black Baptist church, and they're in that church, they're always sinners, and other churches echo the same thing. You're always a sinner. No matter how many times you're forgiven, you're still a sinner. What the and sin is this idea that no matter what you did, can never be reversed, or whatever happened to you it can never be reversed. Yeah, and love in the Course's thought system, sin is definitely mutable. Through love, anything is healed. Through love, they only truly help anyone through the eyes of love. How are we doing on time? It's about 3:15. Comments, questions? Steve, I appreciate the conversation.
You're
Bob,
welcome.
and you have anything you want to add? Hopefully, I hope you have given me a new way to think about this. One more thought coming back to this. I've done this lesson, I don't know how many times, and every time I do it, it's like, where did this come from? A lot of the course does that for me. It's always new. It's so profound. It meets you where you are. So my attack thoughts are attacking my invulnerability. That as popped into my head as I was worried about something. It's like, oh, that's an attack thought. By worrying, I'm attacking myself. And the lesson has you go through, I'm concerned about, and then you go through why you're concerned about this, and like a litany of fear or anger or horrible things, start on becoming clear that you're actually thinking about them, or again, I don't like that word thinking in this context, but it also becomes clear that you don't have to think those thoughts, that there's choice, that or I'm listening to the wrong voice. And the diagram that I typically use, it depicts ego stereo and spirit stereo, ego stereo and Holy Spirit stereo. And ego stereo is the one that it's so soothing. You need to worry. You need to be afraid. And it's like seductive. And then spirit stereo is be at peace, nothing is happening. And that's living the three-dimensional reality, when so much is happening right now, to come back to nothing's happening. It is a tremendous discipline. And that's why, especially in beginning lessons, you're asked to repeat something, every half hour. I think this one says every half hour. Or every 5 minutes, or it's a mind training to get you out of that constant yada 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 yada, that inner what is it, they used to like a hamster wheel, going over and over and over and over, or like they used to call it monkey mind. They probably still call it monkey mind somewhere, that there's all this chattering going on. And my husband came up with this great meditation, like all this chattering's going on, and to visualize a tree, and there's these monkeys in the tree, and they're ripping leaves and jumping from branch to branch, and they're chattering and they're hitting each other, and spitting and doing other things. And then off in the distance, there's a big puffy white cloud comes into the scene, and the cloud opens up and it starts raining bananas. So one by one, the monkeys climb out of the tree, come down to the ground, cross over, this parkland, and go after the bananas. And it's just a really good reminder, you can sit and meditate and watch the monkeys, clear the tree of your mind, and the tree of the mind is returned to to return to peace. So on that note, I think I will end unless any comments, questions. Bob, I would love to see what your essay is that I inspired you to write. And where can I find it? You may share it later today or next Monday. When you'll share it when you're on. Are you on a Monday? I'll look for you on ACIM Gather. And with that, Lynn, I will turn this over to you. We got about 10 minutes, but I feel I'm complete, if that's okay. So thank you. And thanks for the conversations, Steve. I appreciate it. Dino James Books. Okay.
James Books. Yeah, that's Robert's website, and he puts all of his essays on there.
Dino James Books. I'll look it up.
And then on this evening he'll be here at 7 with Sharon, sharing
Oh,
some of
cool.
his essays.
Okay.
He is a
Okay.
prolific writer.
So you, I always forget to do this. I'm a terrible self-promoter. So my email is sorah@gmail.com. And I also have a Substack newsletter that I post once a week. And it's about spirituality and sexuality, since I've been teaching human sexuality for 19 years. But it's more about it's about the greater culture and spirit. So that's dr sorah.dubitsky.substack.com. So Dr. Sorah.Dubitsky.substack.com. And like I said before, I also have a podcast on YouTube, also about sexuality, but also spirituality thrown in. And that's Birds, Bees, and Beyond. And again, that's on YouTube. And the Substack is called Eros and Essence. And Eros are those things in the world that bring us, that enliven the senses. Like not the worry stuff, the other stuff. And that as eros or pleasure is awakened, we discover essence, who we really are. So there's some interesting stuff in there. I've been posting for over a year. Anyway, thank you guys, and thank you, Lynn. And you said I'll look at the schedule. You said tonight at 7.
Yes.
Okay, I'm writing that down.
All right.
All
Great.
right. Thank you.
so much.
Thank you for hosting me, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for the conversation.